A warm welcome to our guest of the evening and my fellow peers. It's been a long, hard day for all of us, but today we learn the basics of a very important skill that we all need to possess, the art of data storytelling. We are privileged to have Mr. Raghavshyam Ramamurthy amongst us. Shyam Ramamurthy is the co-founder of Wilson Consulting Private Limited. He has 25 plus years of experience across the globe. Shyam completed his MBA at the Whitman School of Management in Syracuse, New York, specializing in supply chain management. He worked in the US for 10 years across manufacturing, chemical processing, and utility industries. His company offers a wide range of analytics solutions to companies across the globe. Shyam has a strong passion for visual analytics and functional analytics. He also has a strong passion for teaching. He currently visits IIT Madras, IIM Calcutta, IIM Ranchi, Masters Union, Great Lakes Institute of Management, XLRI, and Whitman School of Management, Syracuse, where he teaches marketing analytics, business analytics, and visual analytics at various levels. So, hello, sir. Sir, I just wanted to ask, you changed career paths almost a decade ago. How did you decide to transform your career from an energy industry to founding a consulting firm?
Pretty simple, Ronak. Again, since I was working in the energy utility industry, I wanted to come back to India, relocate. And since I relocated, I realized whatever I was doing in the energy industry, electric utility industry, data is data ultimately. So it's just a matter of putting the data in terms of a context. So I really enjoyed working with data, working across departments. So why not do it for across multiple industries, multiple functions? So it just came to be.
So, considering data is such an integral part of the decision-making process of all companies, where does one start his or her journey in this data-driven world, like from a career and skill set perspective?
Obviously, like you said, data is an ocean, right? Again, if you think about the analytics, it's an ocean. But if you can kind of silo it, there are three main aspects to data analytics, right? One is the data collection part, where you think about massaging the data. And then next part comes the actual number crunching, where you think about applying certain tools, certain techniques, looking at predictive functions, applying statistical functions. The last part is presentment of data. How do you communicate a story? How do you present the data? So within each of these spheres, there's multiple tools you can learn, right? For data processing, you call it as data engineering, where you think about database management, data engineering, and all of that. And for statistical things, you can think about tools like R, Python, and for data visualization, you have tools like Power BI, Tableau, and so on. So to focus on that, I think if anyone's interested in this field, I think I would say get a flavor for each of the different aspects and then pursue that passion. Obviously, you can't immediately jump into all three. Try and identify a skill set that you're strong in, where your interest lies in, and then based on that, you can deep dive into that particular specialization, that particular technique, and then get a well-rounded perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sir, that completely does. So you mentioned like you enter into all, but eventually you realize which part is your expertise. So you continue in that.
Exactly. It's about finding your passion, right? So again, you realize ultimately the one thing I tell to my students is don't jump into analytics just because it's a next hard thing. I didn't have this foresight 20 years ago and realized that data was going to be the next big gold rush, right? But I pursued what was interesting to me. If you wake up on a Monday, if you love Mondays, that means you're in the right job. If not, quit it and try something else.
Makes sense. So, sir, a lot of times it happens that we collected the data and we have computed the parameters, but are unable to make meaning out of it. Can you shed some more light on the art of storytelling, which is backed by insights?
Absolutely. Again, most people make the mistake of directly jumping into storytelling without finding the insight. So it's a very iterative process. You take a data set, look at some insights, try to communicate a story, see if it kind of makes sense. Go back to it. Based on your first view, you're probably going to think, you know what, this looks great. Maybe let me go back and try out something else. And then you're going to keep adding to it. So it's a very, very iterative process, which is a great segue to what I'm going to show you guys, because I'm going to show you a use case of we'll walk through a data set. And then I'll show you how you have the story beforehand, and then how you can go about building a template to present your story.
That's great, sir. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ronak. For those participants who are looking at me, I have two monitors, right? So again, when I'm looking this way, don't think I'm ignoring the camera. I just facing this way because I'm sharing my screen here, but this is where my camera is. So, and again, Ronak, feel free to interrupt me during any point in time. I'm used to interruptions. Let's see an introductory slide, but I think Ronak gave you guys a better introduction than I would have given myself. But again, it's part of the slides. I'll send it over to you guys if you guys want to look at it. And my LinkedIn profile is available. So it's pretty much available online. So I'll skip this part. Before we jump into actual data storytelling, I want to talk about 6 key steps to understand how do you communicate stories to data. I use this whether I teach or whether I do consulting. Anything that you do with data and try and think of it as storytelling is going to fall into one of these 6 steps. The first one is cognition, and how do you understand visual perception. So this is nothing but the science behind how there are some of the strengths. There are a lot of strengths of our brain, but there are also some weaknesses of our brain. So learning to design information views that cater to the strengths of the human brain, and more importantly, avoiding the weakness, is what this part of the visual science deals with. The next part is how do you create a visual. So meaning, when you have a story to present, you've got to be thinking about what is the most important chart, what is the type of chart I want to use. Well, there's a very specific method which I'll elaborate with a data set, with an example, how you go about choosing the most appropriate chart. And then comes a dashboard. Just because you put multiple things on a screen doesn't constitute a well-designed dashboard. There are some design principles, a scientific, methodical way of arranging things together on a visual display that communicates a business insight. And fourth is, again, if you guys know, or if you love reading books, fiction, I'm a big fan of fiction. I always have a paperback copy in my bag, right, whenever I travel. Most fiction writers, right, they know the ending before they start writing the book so that it connects the dots. That's the whole idea behind the structure of your storytelling, right? So when you're trying to present a story to a client or to your peers or to your boss, try to summarize the key insight in one sentence. If you're not able to do it, that means you've still not understood the essence of your story, right? So that's what I call as a one sentence rule. And then the fifth part is storyboards, where you think about what sort of structure, right? Do I reveal everything all at once? Or do I piecemeal it? Do I just show a high level summary, go down one level deeper, and then deeper, and so on, right? So think about your audience. You don't want to overwhelm them with information. Last but not the least, right? No longer are we in the world of static displays. We're thinking about interactivity. We're thinking about user experience. Always pay close attention to what I call as data ink and non-data ink. All right. So this concept was pioneered by the visualization guru, Mr. Edward Tufte. Edward Tufte has written a lot of books about visualization. One of the things he talks about in one of his famous books is called is the data ink and non-data ink component, wherein if you take a chart, all that it's made up of is data and non-data. The components that make up the data ink are just your data, your labels, your headers, and so on. The non-data ink components are things that add supporting visuals. So meaning these are your legends, your subtitles, your footnotes, your titles, your subtitles. These are things that add context to your visual. So the idea behind refining your story is to make sure that you reduce or de-emphasize the non-data ink portion and emphasize the data ink portion, right? So enough theory. I mean, I'll go over this. The reason why I wanted to start off with this is what I'm going to be showing you is going to fall under one of these 6 principles of design of storytelling, because it's not an art. Yes, it is to an extent where it has to be aesthetically appealing, but the overall outcome should be business-based, should be fact-based. We have a very specific scientific methodology when approaching data storytelling. So that's kind of why I wanted to start out with this. So let me jump into some hands-on activity, right? Well, I'll open up a data set, and like I said, my tool of choice is Tableau. I use this for my consulting. I've been using Tableau for about more than 15, 16 years, I think, right now. And I continue to learn new things every day. Well, let me share what I'm going to open up. So this is a data set which I'm going to use. It contains, since I'm assuming most of the audience for this session is going to be from India, I've taken a data set that is related to India. So I've got a typical retail data set where I have at the row level ID, each record contains an order, and it contains some key values like customer information, right? What the customer ID is, what the name of the customer is. And again, some product level information. Let me zoom my screen a bit. Some product level information in terms of what segments they cater to, what are the high level product categories, what are product subcategories, and the shipping type. We also have some geospatial information where we talk about region, state, and city level information. And then there are some Towards the last part, you have some quantitative values, which we'll be making use of, where we talk about what is the sales, the profits, the quantities, and we also have over to the left discounts as well. Some quantitative values to slice and dice the data. So let me open this up in Tableau, and then I'll show you how you can build a story around it. Right. So if I just open up Tableau, it's going to take a moment to open up. So this is the first screen that opens up when you open up Tableau for the first time. Right, I'm going to, these are the various connection options you can connect to. You can connect to a local based file, which are files that reside inside your system. So these are your text files, your access files, your Excel files, and so on. You can also connect to a server based file. So these are things like your Oracle tables, your SQL tables, and these are all native connectors, meaning if all you need is just a username, password. And if you have read write access or even read access, read only access, you can pretty much connect to any of these data sources. Tableau does a pretty good job of adding new connection parameters during every update. So you have like Oracle connectors. You can just click on Oracle, type in your server name, and connect to it directly. You have SQL connectors. You have SAP connectors. So a whole host of connectors. The beauty of this is whether you connect to an Excel file, which I'm going to do now, or whether you connect to any of these files, the structure is pretty much the same. The structure after which you go about managing your data, how it looks like inside your workbooks is going to be very similar. All right. So let me open up the file here. So if I click on Microsoft Excel, it's going to ask me to navigate to a folder, which I'll go to in a bit. All right. And if I double click on that Excel folder, it's going to open up a view like this. Gives you a small preview of what the data set is. And then I click on sheet 1, it takes me to the first sheet automatically. So here is where all your data sets are available. So I have my Tableau divides your data into dimensions and measures. Dimensions are categorical attribute labels, and your measures are down below where they are quantitative in nature, where you can summarize your data sets and so on. So let's say if I were to just create an initial summary of my table. Let's say I look at, I don't know, subcategory. And I just drag and drop the values here. Within subcategory, let's say I want to look at my profit. Or let's say I just look at, I'll show you a cool technique here. So measure values, measure names are some inbuilt values that Tableau brings in automatically. So it's a great way to summarize your data set in terms of a cross tab. So I'm just going to put measure values under the text shelf. And it gives me all of these. It gives me the count, which I don't want, customer number, which just don't make sense because customer number is like an ID. Discounts. So it essentially gives me multiple things, but I'm just going to filter for just profit and sales. I'm just going to take out things here that I don't need. Right, let's say I just look at profit and sales. So this is a great view of a summary tab by profit, by sales. How my product subcategory is going to vary. And let's say if I add region, I can slice and dice this. Well, I can look at profit across regions. If I were to swap these, I can just say by region, by both the measures, what the values are. Right. So here's where I want to talk a little bit about our visual cognition. Let me switch back to my slides here. So when you're thinking about the strengths of a human brain and the weaknesses of a human brain, there's something called as pre-attentive attributes. So take a look at the image on the left. And I'm going to flash an image to the right side of this, and it's going to disappear within a fraction of a second. And I want you to spot one key difference between the image on the left and the image on the right. Ready? Here we go. Again, if you guys noticed it, there was a red dot that was different. For those of you who missed it, there's one more chance. Red squares. And I'm going to flash another image to the right side of this. And I want you to tell me if you can spot something different between the image on the left, image on the right. And it's going to disappear in a fraction of a second. Here you go.
There were more dots.
You had another red dot. Absolutely. Right? Again, let's try once more. both squares and circles? I'm guessing you probably need more time now because it's not that hard, that easy to find. And if I were to point out the answer here, this is the red dot that was different from the left side. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Color and shape are the strongest of what we call as pre-attentive attributes. Pre-attentive attributes are things that our brain absorbs in advance of conscious thought. When you saw the first two images, you didn't even count the dots. You didn't even think too much twice about it. You saw it as an image. Your brain absorbed it as a whole. Instantly, you were able to spot the differences. This is a list of commonly used pre-attentive attributes, which help us make our visuals stand out a lot better. All this is good in theory, but so what? What does it have to do with data storytelling? Let's go back to Tableau. Created this summary sheet. And I want you guys to tell me which product subcategory in which region has high sales and low profits. And we have 3 seconds to answer this question. 3, 2, 1. Time's up. The answer is, don't even try. This table is not meant to answer that question, right? Because it doesn't make use of your pre-attentive attributes. Let's redesign this so that we make use of our pre-attentive attributes. I'm going to open up one more sheet here. And this time, I'm going to start creating visual product subcategory. And I'm going to add sales on the columns. So the length of the bar indicates the sum of sales. Tableau by default aggregates everything, right? So think of this as an Excel pivot summary. Again, the way that would explain someone to someone who's a brand new user of Tableau, think of Tableau as an Excel Power Pivot or Excel pivot on steroids. That's kind of how I would describe Tableau to a beginner. But obviously, it's much more beyond that. Right. So obviously here, length of the bar corresponds to sales. Bigger the bar, greater the sum of sales. I'm going to subset it by region. If I bring in region over here, by region, I have the sum of sales. Now, I've used the property of color, of size. I'm going to bring in the property of color. So profit, I'm going to drag and drop it and place it onto the color shelf. It creates a legend. All right, so darker the blue, greater the profit. Darker the orange, greater the loss. So now go back and try and answer the same question I posed to you. Which product subcategory in which region has high sales, low profits? So high sales means bigger bigger length of the bar, which is this guy over here. And lower profits means darker orange. So eyes are immediately drawn to this big red or big orange bar. So jams in the West are my high sales and low profit product subcategories. Simple but very efficient way of using pre-attentive attributes. All right. So the next part of storytelling, right, is about how do you choose the most appropriate chart. And like I said, there are so many chart choices available. And it's not like today I'm in the mood for a pie chart, tomorrow I'm in the mood for a 3D chart. It does not work that way. There's a very specific science behind how you go about choosing charts. Part of it has to do with the business question that you have at hand. I mean, obviously, what is the business question you're trying to answer? The second part is going back to this pre-attentive attributes. This is a list of pre-attentive attributes arranged in the scale. This is called the Cleveland-McGill scale. So these two researchers came up with this scale and they said that our human perception allows for more comparisons when we use things that are up above on this axis like bars and boxes. As we go down, our human brain does not do comparisons a lot easily, but they are used for more general high-level overviews. So as you come down, so think about this, like if this color is different, I'm not interested to understand how much darker this blue is than this blue. All I need to know is just this blue is darker, right? So high-level views. Also translate this in terms of number of data points. So more the number of data points, you want to use things like your area, your color, and intensity, and so on. Fewer the number of data points, you can use things like lines, your bars, and so on. Right? So this could act as a thumb rule or a guiding point in terms of how you go about choosing the most appropriate chart. All right. So coming to storytelling, right? I'm going to jump to storytelling and then we'll go back and create a dashboard. Like I said, one of the key things when you're trying to tell stories through data is the structure. So like I said, in this data set, I've formed a structure. I've looked at the data set before, and I have a story in mind that I want to communicate. And let me draw a blueprint. this is most important. I mean, most of my consulting work, the first few sessions are pen and paper activities. On purpose, I don't take my computer. I don't jump into the tool directly. I don't even jump into the data. First, ask questions, draw pen and paper activities. Let me show an example, working example, how that looks like. We maybe create a blank workbook here. All right. So I'm going to start off with my first high level overview. I'm going to say my subcategory and sales. I'm going to draw a bar chart that depicts a subcategory and sales across all my whatever 15, 16 subcategories. Then I'm going to introduce the element of color. So I'm going to bring in subcategory. This time I'm going to bring in profit and sales. So wherein I create a view that looks like, let's look at profits and also looks at sales for both for the product subcategory level. Then I'm going to break this down at the region level. I have 4 regions: East, West, North, and South. So by region, I'm going to look at product subcategory and see how it varies. The next point in my story, I'm going to start creating a dashboard. So I'm going to build something like this. I'm going to bring in this East, West, North, South with the region-wise view. And I'm going to bring in a geospatial map first, wherein since I have India data, I'm going to draw a map of India, wherein I have color coded the states by profit and sales. Maybe also have another map of India wherein I have at the city level what my points are. So I want to create something like this. And then I'll move on to one more dashboard where I still start off with my region, East, West, North, and South. And this time I'm going to look at a couple of different maps. So maybe I'll look at a tree map, which is a great use case for using multi-dimension data. And I'll explain what a tree map is and how you can read that. And I'll also look at a scatter plot wherein I try and understand the relationship between profit and sales and how it goes up. So these are my different components I'm going to create. Let me label them. So this is chart number 1. This is number 2. Number 3. This will be number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. These are repeated. So this will be again number 3. This is also number 3 again. So I'm going to create 7 different charts, and I'm also going to create 2 different dashboards. These charts will be collected in the form of a dashboard. So this will be dashboard 1. This will be dashboard 2. Right. So this is my plan. And like I said, this is my layout. So I'm going to go ahead and try and build this inside of Tableau. First, we'll create 7 different charts. Then we'll create 2 different dashboards. Then we'll connect the dots to create a storyline. All right. So the first view, I'm going to create product subcategory and sales, and arrange them from high to low. It gives me an arranging descending order. So this is going to be my first view. I'm just going to call it subcategory or subcat for a chart. All right. Then the next view I'm going to create, I can reuse some of what I've done before. So that's one great tip I end up using almost all the time. I'm going to right click and click on duplicate. So that I'm going to get an exact same copy. And this time I'm going to add profit on the color shelf. So my story here is, let me just say subcat sales and profit. So if you can get the drift of my story, I'm going to start off with this main view wherein I see jams is like one of the 4th highest selling products in terms of sales. However, if I look at subcategory and color code this, jams has also one of the highest losses. Right? So that's going to be the theme of my story. So how do you look at profitability? How do you look at profitability of jams? And I'm going to right click and click on duplicate again. And I'm going to incorporate the element of region. I'm going to drag and drop region onto the column shelf. So now I can slowly start to decipher in jams. Not all 4 regions are actually bad. In fact, the Western region is worse, which we kind of found out in the previous view as well. So I'm going to name this region. Right. So this forms the first 3 parts of my storyboard. Again, if I navigate back to my blueprint, we've created the first chart, the second one, and the third one. So let's go ahead and create the 4th one, which is a map. So I'm going to call it state. And I'm going to double click on the state. And it creates a map of India where I have different values, different points I have. And I'm going to change these marks card from automatic to a map. So wherein I fill the colors. Right now, the colors mean nothing. All it means is I have data for these different states. I'm going to bring in profit, place it onto the color shelf. So darker the, again, the color legend pops up, darker the blue, greater the profit, darker the orange, lower the greater the loss or lower the profit. I can already sense that the northern part of the country has more losses, whereas the western and the eastern part are relatively okay. Right. So I'm going to duplicate this even further. I'm going to, well, let me create something else. I'm going to click on a new worksheet, and this time I'm going to expand this to the city level. And I'm going to double click on city this time. And I get dots for each and every city based on my data set. So since I have this city, I can use sales on my size shelf. So wherein the size of the dots represents the sum of sales. The greater this size, larger the sum of sales. And I'm going to drag and drop profit onto the color shelf. So I can expand this size slider if I want to. Right now, this chart is kind of dominated by a couple of dots in Madhya Pradesh, and where is this coming from? This is in UP, right? But again, remember, this is a high-level overview. We are not here. This chart is not meant for accurate comparisons at the individual or at the overall level. We're going to use this as a drill down. We're going to reveal sequentially and drill down into a specific region or a specific state or even a specific set of cities. Right? So that's what this chart is going to be used at. But high-level view is where we start off with. All right. The next view I'm going to create is called a tree map. A tree map makes use of, again, both the area of a visual and also the color of a visual. So let me explain what I mean by that. I have a hierarchy here. I'm going to bring in the segment and maybe the product subcategory and maybe the product type. Product type should probably go up, right? And then I'm going to bring in sales and place it onto the size shelf. Now, let me do it one at a time. It'll be easy for you guys to understand. I'm going to remove all of these. All right. So I'm going to start off with the product type. All right. So the way to read a tree map is a part to whole comparison. The bigger the size, more the measure. So meaning here, since I have sum of sales, that means canned foods has a higher sales, followed by preserved food, and then by processed meat. If I bring in the element of color, profit goes onto the color shelf. Right. The color legend appears. It goes from light blue to dark blue. Since the theme of my story here is light orange to dark blue, I'm going to change the color scheme. Again, that's something that's important in storytelling. Individually, your color choices might make sense, but then together, cohesively, as a bundle, does it make sense or is it consistent? So that's another thing you want to be thinking about. Go to color, click on edit colors. Under the palette, I'm going to click on orange. So there's a whole host of inbuilt palettes that Tableau has. I'm going to choose the orange blue diverging scheme and click OK. So again, if you think about pause for a minute to think about the insight here. So preserved food is the second highest in terms of sales, but it is also one of the lowest in terms of profit because it has a dark orange color. So that's how I would read a tree map. Once you know how to read one tree map, then you can expand it further and add multiple components to it. So under product type, I'm going to add maybe the product subcategory under the label shelf. Right, it's a further subdivision. So I can see preserved foods. Again, jams again is coming to our picture. That's again the theme of a story. So I can see jams is one of the highest selling, but also one of the least profit makers as well. I can drill it down even further. Maybe I can bring in the customer name, right, under the text shelf. And right now this looks horribly cluttered, but the way to read a complex visual like this is you're looking at high level overviews. Think about some key insights. Let me put this on full screen mode real quick so you guys can see this. All you need to know to read this visual is, what does the color mean? What does the size mean? So greater the size of rectangle, greater the sum of sales. Darker the blue, more the profits. Darker the orange, lower the profits. That's all you need to know to understand this tree map. Let me just hide this as well. So again, maximize my real estate. So at a glance, think of some key insights that jump out. Preserved food is one of the highest selling products for this particular customer. It's making one of the highest profits. And I can process meat. I can see one of the highest profit makers are here. Similarly, in the canned foods is where I see most of my losses. A lot of orange rectangles are here in the canned foods department, and same here as well. Right. And then you can also start to see, once you look at high level overviews, outliers, then you start looking at segmentation, summary. For some reason, these preserved food sun-dried tomatoes, right? You either have extremely high volumes or extremely low volumes, and it's a mixture of high profit and low profit items. So for whatever reason, this is a great way to segment your data, right? Or segment your products. I can probably understand what is going on with this segment and separate them out with this segment. Also look at further segmentation. Are these product categories even worth carrying in a portfolio? Probably not. Right. So these are things that you can get from a tree map like this. Don't use a tree map to try and understand how much we are selling of sun-dried tomatoes this particular customer against this particular customer. That is not the intent of a tree map. Again, don't use a tree map for displaying 10 values, 20 values, or even 100 values. Think about how many data points you're looking at. If you look at on the bottom left side here, 1,674. So close to 1,700 data points is being displayed on this tree map. That's what a tree map is good for. Right? If you were to use smaller data sets, rather switch to a bar chart. Right? So this is one of the easiest and quickest way to look at multivariate dimensions at a glance. All right. So going back to what we were talking about. So we've created 4, 5, 6. The last part we're going to create is a scatter plot. All right. So scatter plot is going to use when you're trying to display relationships between two variables. So let's say I'm trying to understand relationship between profit and sales. I'm going to open up one more sheet here. I'm just going to call it scatter plot for lack of a better word. So the way I'm going to create a scatter plot is I'm going to double click on profit, double click on sales. By default, like I said, Tableau aggregates everything. All these sales and all the profits are summarized, but I click on the analysis tab and uncheck this aggregate measures. I get a overall distribution of how at the lowest level of detail the profits and sales are distributed. Right. So I can also do a trend line. I can right click on trend lines, click on show trend lines. Right. And those of you who are interested, you can look behind the scenes. You can see how the equation is built with your R-square and p-value and so on. Right. Now, let me add the element of color. Profit goes onto color. And since these are dots, I can maybe try and understand it based on a different dimension, different measure as well. Let's say maybe I look at discounts. I can add discount and place it on the size. So if you look at this, looks like most of the discounts are being offered where there's lower profitability, right? So maybe some inclination of an insight is coming up here. So we're done with all 7 charts. Now we're going to put these together on a dashboard, right? So before we create a dashboard, this is also a dashboard. Take a moment to think about what is wrong with this. typically when I show this in a class or to a client, they all step back like this, right? Whatever can go wrong in a dashboard has gone wrong in this, right? Choice of colors, choice of charts, the arrangement of visuals, a lot of data points. So then what is a well-designed dashboard? So think about dashboard as prime real estate that you don't want to waste. Right? Typically, most of us read in either a Z fashion or an N fashion. So you start out with your visuals here, then either go to the right, go down here, and go here, or you go in an N fashion. You start here, go up, and go down here. All right. So think of visual hierarchy. Where do your eyes go first when you look at a screen? And the second thing is, how do we like to read data? Right. So position, color, obviously common sense steps, but then the based on how you can use size and shape, right? You can try and create that visual hierarchy, right? So as an example of what visual hierarchy means, take a moment, just watch my screen for a bit. I'm going to show you an image. I want you to, there's going to appear a set of words. I want you guys to read it as quickly as possible, right? Take about 10 seconds to read this real quick here. This is visual hierarchy, right?
I read it in the exact same fashion as mentioned over there.
Did you? Most of us tend to read it, right? Because our eyes are trying to, humans by nature are visual thinkers. Visually, we try, our emphasis is where the biggest thing is, where the most emphasizes, and then it follows a de-emphasized pattern. So that's an example of visual hierarchy. Just nothing is changing. Everything is the same, just based on size, how do you emphasize a visual hierarchy? Okay, that's kind of interesting here. Right. So let's go back and build out our dashboard, and then we'll connect the dots in a storyboard before I run out of time. All right, so far we've been creating individual sheets where I've clicked on the plus icon. So now I'm going to click on this plus icon with these 4 squares. If I click on this 4 squares, it opens up a dashboard. All right. And first, I'm going to expand this. I'm going to say I don't want a fixed size. I'm going to give me an automatic size. So that essentially fills up my screen. So think this white canvas that you see has filled up my entire screen. So that way I don't have scrolls running on the bottom. I don't have scrolls, vertical scrolls, and so on. So this will ensure that I have a full screen to play with. So I'm going to drag the region. And right below the region, I'm going to add state. Right next to state, I'm going to add city. And I don't want the legends because I'm not interested to find the lowest level of details anyway. At that, from the legend perspective, I'm going to put this in mode. I can just maybe expand this, maybe make some space, and so on. All right. So there is, if you look at it individually, each of these charts give you some insight. When put together on a dashboard, that's where you can try and see how all of them connect together. So I'm going to click on this region where I just click on anywhere on the white space of the dashboard, and you see there's a small box that appears around it. There's a filter icon. When I click on it once, it turns white in color. Going back to the question we're trying to answer, jams in the Western region. If you were a product manager, this would be one of your major pain points. So why are we doing worse in jams? Well, because the more we sell of jams in the West, the more money we are losing. So if I were to click on this, notice what happens. The entire dashboard filters just for that particular view. Right, so I can already start to see some insights. I can see the states and the cities where I'm making huge losses. Right. So this is my first dashboard. Just like how you can duplicate sheets, you can also duplicate dashboards. I'm going to right click and duplicate one more. We'll just call this dashboard 2. I'm going to add the tree map and the scatter plot and remove the state and the city because I don't want these guys anymore. You can do the same thing. I'm going to click on jams again. And if you notice, it's not as steep as what we saw at a high level. So it looks like the more we sell, profits slightly increase, but not so much. And obviously discount has a huge negative impact on profits. Can also see some areas where I have some customers where I have low sales, but for the most part, most of my customers, I'm selling jams at a loss in the Western region. That's kind of my key takeaway here. All right. So I go back to my slide here where we talked about the storytelling. We've created all of these. We're done with all of this. So now I'm just going to connect all of these together in a storyboard. All right. So I'm just going to link all of these. There's a small storybook icon here. If I click on this, right, I'm going to again make this automatic so that I can view my entire screen. We'll start off with the first story point. I'm going to bring in my subcategory and I'm going to add my caption here. So essentially, I'm saying my jams, right? They are the 4th highest in terms of sales. All right, something like that. I can add a caption. So I'm introducing my user to the first insight. Then I'm going to add another blank point where I bring in the subcat and region. I'm going to say, however, here's my main plot of the story. However, profitability is not great. And then my third point, when I bring in the region, slowly I introduce my users to the main point here. I'm going to say, you know what, the problem is at the Western region. So I'm going to say profitability in the West is especially low. Then I'm going to create another blank point. This time I'm going to bring in my dashboard, the first dashboard that we created. Since it's already filtered for West and jams, I can say profitability in Madhya Pradesh. And this red dot is a city inside of Madhya Pradesh called Rewa, right? An MP, and specifically Rewa MP is the lowest. So I'm pinpointing my users to the main cause. And then finally, my last blank point, where I bring the second dashboard, and I can see that higher discounts lead to lower profits. All right. So if I were to present this to a client, this is how I would start off with. I would put this in full screen mode. I would say, hey, here's your view, and you go through this, and then you go through this point, and then till this point, it's user-driven. Sorry, author-driven, wherein you communicate a story. From this point, from the 4th, 5th point onwards, it's user-driven. There's a very specific style of storytelling. This is called, and let me show you what it means. Go back to my PPT here. We started off in this unidirectional manner, wherein I force my users to go from one point to the next point, to the next point, and so on. At this point, I've expanded my options. I've introduced interactivity. My users can take this in whatever direction. I filtered for jams in the West. Nothing stops them to click on any other product, maybe in the East or the West. So if I go back to my dashboard, I can say, you know what, okay, West is doing that, but maybe what happens in the South? How's that faring? Is there anything different we're doing in the South? Or maybe what happened to jams as a whole? If I click on jams throughout the country, I can see where my main areas are. So I can navigate it in multiple ways. I can enable my user actions in whatever manner they require. So that's what's happening at this point in time, wherein they expand it to multiple levels. There's a very specific type. There's a lot of storytelling techniques we borrow from the print industry. They have tried and tested methodologies. This method is called, if you think about the shape, it's actually a funnel. And if you think about this, if you invert it, it looks like a Martini glass, right? And that's what this is called. This is called a, let me see if I can Google this for you guys. This is called a Martini glass story structure. Let's see if you get some images here. There you go. So this one. So this is what it looks like. So wherein you start off with an author-driven approach, you introduce your audience to a main story point, and then you prod them towards a point till they're comfortable with your story, and then you let them explore the data. And at that point, where the transition happens, it transitions from your story to their story. That's where the user engagement happens, right? So this is an example of how you take a data set from scratch, build your story, and embed it in a structure like this. Right. I know we've been talking for about 45 minutes now, so I'll pause at this time to see if there are any questions.
So that was really, really insightful. And we have some questions for you. So the first question is from Anirudh. He mentions, would it be helpful if you could point us to any resources to learn from for Tableau or and Power BI? Many would like to pick it up post the session.
All right, definitely. One of the easiest ways to start learning Tableau is right from their help desk itself. If you open up the help icon, and if you click on training videos, this will take you to a website where, and it's free of cost. You don't need to pay for any of these. You can just look at free training videos. You can try it out on the trial versions, and these are bite-sized videos you can look at, and there are self-paced learnings. Again, once you're comfortable with it, you can get a more instructor-led training and so on. So this would be, I would recommend this should be your starting point.
Okay, sir. So one more question. What is the difference between Tableau and Power BI? Because here at Masters Union, we have been recently taught Power BI, and like how fascinating Tableau looks. There are some benefits to Power BI. Let's say it also has an integration with Excel. So what would you recommend to like start with, Tableau or Power BI? Or
I'm biased towards Tableau, right? Because I've been using that for multiple years. But let me Power BI is catching on. Okay, again, before Power BI was introduced, Tableau was like the #1 leader in the market. The reason I like Tableau or Power BI is very intuitive. There's a very the learning curve is not steep. Without any programming, you can pretty much come up with Power. I'm allergic to programming, right? If you show me a piece of code, I run away, right? So for people like me, Tableau is great. You don't need to be doing like complex DAX queries and DAX functions. You don't need to learn that. So that's one advantage of using Tableau. There are some pros and cons. Obviously, I mean, Power BI, if you're used to the Microsoft environment, Power BI is going to be very handy. Its strength, I would say, based on what I've seen so far in my consulting world, its strength is a data modeling part. When you want to do modeling part, the Power Query editor is especially powerful in Power BI. So I would use that if you have more scenarios where it involves more complex modeling, data managing, mangling, and so on. Tableau does have a little bit of data modeling, but it's not as robust as Power BI, right? The other thing I like about Tableau is the speed, right? The same data set, if you take it in Power BI and Tableau, definitely Tableau is going to give you a much better performance, right? And obviously people talk about the cost. I mean, they say Power BI desktop is free, but is it really free? I mean, you're already bought into the Microsoft ecosystem, so it's part of that. But then if you start publishing Power BI, then you have to pay for the Power BI services, but whereas Tableau charges you upfront. So there's a pros and cons. There's a whole host of people who are strongly against Tableau and strongly against Power BI. My short answer is try out both. Whatever you're comfortable with, go with that. Tool doesn't matter. Whatever we do, the techniques are really more important.
okay, sir. So this question is around data cleaning. Per se, can you give us some tips on how to handle situations when the data isn't rich and we do not have a very clear story to tell?
If the data is not clean, that means you're working with real data. The data is clean, that means you're working with fake data. As simple as that, right? Majority of the time, when I do consulting work, about 30 to 40% of my time I spend in data cleaning. That is the unglamorous part of data science. You have to go through that, and the effort is well worth it because you're going to understand the process. You're going to talk to your stakeholders. So that's where your understanding of the domain of the specific company of the specific domain comes in. Because if you notice something and then anomaly in the data, you're going to ask the SME of their particular business person and try and understand it. So part of the learning happens through data cleaning, and your exploratory part, exploratory analysis is going to come through the data cleansing part. So to me, if you are doing data cleaning, that is really the first journey you are going to take when you're actually trying to do the analysis. And to complete what I said in terms of percentages, 40% of the time is spent in data cleaning. The actual analysis, believe it or not, takes only 20% of the time. The remaining 40% is more the presentment part where you're trying to polish your story and so on.
So during the session, you mentioned, when you were talking about the scatter plot, the R square and the P value. So just a general question in the sense, how important it is to know statistics if you're working on data of this sort, or for a career in this, like data visualization or data analytics, how important it is to know statistics properly?
Most courses will teach you the basics of statistics, right? When you're enrolled in an analytics program, when you're doing specialization, you start with basic statistics. To me, I think that is a fundamental. Even though you're not going to be doing statistics day in and day out, just a high level view on general statistics, your descriptive stats, some predictive stats. What does it mean? You don't need to know, again, some statisticians will probably kill me for saying this. You don't need to know coding, right? You don't need to know how to model data, but a basic understanding of what is predictive modeling, what are some linear regression techniques, how to read an output of data. The interpretation part, I think, is definitely important, because when you're working with data, you can't go to a client and say, you know what, I'm going to ignore statistics. I'm just going to focus on the presentment of data. It's not going to work that way. You're going to have a little bit of understanding, translate the insights. Maybe you have an output from a data science team. Maybe they run a regression analysis. They give you a model. You at least know how to interpret the model, and then that will make your job a lot easier.
So there's a question which says, as you mentioned, like coding is something a lot of people are not comfortable with. So can you provide a roadmap for data analytics which is coding free?
You require more than 1 hour for that, right? So I'll answer this question simply, right? So think about data analytics as those 3 pillars that I just mentioned earlier when you asked the first question of skill sets, right? So the data engineering part, the data analysis part, and the data presentment part.
Yes.
So look at tools that will help you in the data engineering part. So things like, there are a lot of tools and techniques out there that will help you do that. So NIME is one which I teach in your one of your courses, right? So KNIME, which is a great tool for data wrangling. You can also use Alteryx, right, or RapidMiner. These are things that will help you to massage the data and all of that. So you can definitely pick up a skill set on one of those non-coding tools for data engineering. Same thing for statistics. You can use any non-programming tool, again, like NIME or RapidMiner, to do some statistical analysis, or even some packages inside of R that will help you. User menu driven option like R Commander, where you don't need to do coding. You can just drag and drop and create your statistics. Obviously, visualization tools like Tableau, Power BI don't require any coding. So I would say pick and choose a tool in one of these 3 things, and I think your roadmap is all set. Once you connect all these 3 together, your roadmap for non-coding analytics is pretty much set.
So one more question. What is the difference between data analytics and business analytics? So there are roles which are in the corporate world also, which are data analyst and business analyst. So what is the difference between the two?
It's going to depend on the detailed job description, but at a high level, let me explain how it came about based on what I've seen so far. Data analyst is more oriented towards people who are creating reports, right, or massaging data and providing to the stakeholders. Business analysts are more people who are translating the data. They know a little bit about it. They do a little bit of, maybe they do a little bit of hands-on work, but they also are able to translate that and translate it into an insight to the business people. And it flows the other way around as well, when they take requirements of the business people and go back to the data folks and get something. More recently, there's a gap in the industry where we see this skill gap, where people, on one end of the spectrum, we have people with high data skills who are extremely proficient in coding and doing a lot of analysis. On the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are just business oriented. Gap is to merge these two. So roles like analytics translators or consultants. So these are typically the consultants, right? So wherein you know a little bit about data, but know enough about the data to translate them into insights and talk back to your customer.
So Uday is asking, what are your comments on data prep tool in Tableau?
I've not used data prep that much. Based on what I've seen, my personal feeling is I'd rather do the data prep outside of Tableau, like a tool like Alteryx or NIME, and then invoke the results inside of Tableau. It's much more cleaner. So
I would like to thank you a lot. That was a really interesting session, and specifically around data storytelling. You mentioned one more point, that there's a one sentence rule, which is you need to know the end before you're starting. So what was the end that you were envisioning, or if I may ask?
So in this specific story that we're doing, right? So
Yeah.
don't offer discounts. So that was my insight after. So again, the blueprint here is I've already done the analysis. This, you don't build the blueprint, you don't build the story from scratch. But so here, after playing with the data, my main insight was the more the discounts, the lower the profits. So my takeaway was, since I ended at that, my overall story is talking about the profitability of jams in the Western region. So don't offer discounts for the sake of profits.
So with this, I would like to end the session. And everyone, thanks you a lot. And it was a great session. All the participants who came and watched this session.
Can I just play a short video just to summarize the session real quick?
Perfect, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
It takes about 2 minutes. I've recorded. In fact, I was doing this for one of my other classes, but I think it's apt for what we've discussed so far, right?
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to communicate the importance of storytelling through music. I'm going to use music as an analogy. I want to communicate some things. I'm going to play a random set of notes, right? So that's really close to cacophony, right? The last bit was more fun for me, right? But anyways, this is how you get raw data. But when you're trying to arrange them in a sequence, right? Descending and descending order. This is how it looks like. Some order exists, little bit more pleasing to hear. But then using these same set of notes, I would play a tune. You might recognize this tune. It's a popular cine song. So this is what I would call as a beginner's way of communicating stories through a dashboard, right? Tune is existing, the tune is there, the structure is there, but it can be enhanced with practice, right? You can add a little bit more bells and whistles to it, make it aesthetically look good from a dashboard perspective. Same set of notes, notice how it looks like when I play it in a different manner. Probably now recognize the music, right? Let me finish the song for you, right? So that's really how you take raw data, sequence them, communicate your insights, and then enhance the insights.
So that honestly made my day.
So I really did this for one of my visualization classes, but I realized, it doesn't matter what tool you use. I mean, today it might be Tableau, tomorrow it might be Power BI. Ultimately, as long as you know how to communicate a concept, right, using just pen and paper, you can pretty much translate it in any tool. Tools can be learned, right, just by watching YouTube videos, but then understanding the concept really is more important. That's kind of the key takeaway I want you guys to take away from this session. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ronak. Good to see you.
Yeah,
thanks
same,
for hosting
sir.
me, guys.
Okay,
Any
sir.
questions, feel free to, again, you have my email, share my LinkedIn profile with them. Any questions, I'm always available to answer any data-related questions.
Okay, thank you.